Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-atheist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any other issue related to those issues. Today I want to continue on in my deconversion story for 2023. I'm kind of lengthening it for a couple of reasons. One, I want to start, exploring for myself how autism might have played a role in some of the things that I experienced. And this one's going to kind of be a big one this week. But I also am kind of using this series as a basis for a book I'm writing about my deconversion, which is slowly taking shape, but I've been taking the videos and starting to write the book, and it's been very therapeutic for me, and so you have to bear with me. It's not that some of these aren't the most exciting things, but unless you're very interested in what the full process of deconversion can look like, this is a massive journey for me. Now, for some people it's quicker, for other people it's kind of medium-sized, and for some of them like me, you have the questions way early, but it takes a long time for your faith to die. Okay, it really does. And so I'm very sympathetic to people going through this. So I hope that maybe through maybe hearing some of my struggles, some of you that are on the fence, take that leap, get out. Okay, I've told people before, you come to my channel and you're questioning with your faith, I'm going to push you off that edge if I can. Okay, because I want you to have your best life and move forward, and part of that is sharing the story. All right, we left off as I got out of education, and my father had died, and that was a very major blow to my life. And basically, I'm going to try to go over some of the things that were going on in the next couple of years. The first major thing that happened to me is I spent probably a majority of the next 2 years in deep depression. Not like, I often talk about my depression in the sense today of every once in a while I got to walk through it, and try to find a way out of it because I don't like the sadness. But back then, my father's death, all the things that I was going through with my faith and trying to struggle with it just hit me really hard. There was just the loss of my father was such that I think it caused, from an autistic point of view, it overloaded my nervous system. And I just had an incredible difficulty in functioning. And, I'm torn because on the one hand, I have this kernel of, is my faith even real? Is this even really something I should be doing? And on the other hand, I have this need to have a belief that I'm going to see my father again, and those two are in tension. And it's really, I know at the time I'm very committed to the call of God in my life, and so these three things are really kind of going at it, and I think it caused an autistic breakdown. It's just my nervous system couldn't handle that kind of stress at the time. And of course, people in the church weren't really giving me anything that really helps. I mean, they always say, well, we'll pray for you. You need to pray more. Maybe you need to increase your faith. The reason really you're struggling, you just don't have enough faith. I lost track of the number of people, the number of times I got called up in front, had, my head anointed with oil and prayed over, God's going to help you break through this depression. People were praying for me for a lot of reasons. You need to read your Bible more, you need to study the Word more. And the problem with that, of course, is I was already having my second thoughts about the Bible in a lot of ways. At the time, there was this, this fundamentalist Assembly of God boy. And I'm really having a struggle with my fundamentalist side because it's like, that can't, I can't be that dogmatic about things because there's too many questions. And I was trying to get into the ministry. I'd applied to be in the ministry. And at this time, though, I did develop a couple solid coping mechanisms to deal with it, I guess. One of them was I started to write. Writing had always been a struggle for me through high school. I barely passed most of my English classes because it just wasn't interesting to me. But when I got into college, I had a moment where I was put in basic English and I aced the course. I worked so hard I aced the course, and then the next semester they put me in honors English in Bible college to do honors English. And then my former teacher who taught me basic English was going to be away for a week, so she wanted me to come back and teach the class. So here I am, a 21-year-old guy getting to teach a college class. And it was a big thrill for me for a week. And that's where I began to develop this love for words and for English and for literature. And I began to read a lot. I began to write. And this is, you got to understand, this is the early days of the internet. It's the early day of computers with word processors. It's, now the biggest problems I always had with writing was spelling. Spelling just didn't stick in my head for some reason. It's weird, like everything else was detail oriented, but spelling I really had to work at. Well, now I had this wonderful magic machine that would mark, hey, this is spelled wrong. Now back then they didn't really give you suggestions as to how to fix it yet. But you knew it was spelled wrong, so you could look it up. And I keep a dictionary by my thing and look it up. The 90s is kind of a weird time where the old and the new kind of blended to make things work. And I started to develop a love for writing. There were online forums back then where you could type in and have a long discussion with people. I mean, now you'd probably just get on video chat and do it, but back then that's what we had. And I found myself in the early barbaric, chaotic days of the internet world, and I loved it. And it would be my release, my moment of escape to do that. Plus, PC games. Gaming was always a thing for me with my board games, but now there were strategy PC games and things like that, and I could play them, things like Civilization 1 and, other games like that, the original Doom, things like that. And I was playing those things, and Doom always made me feel guilty. I shouldn't be engaged in this violent stuff as a Christian and all that other crap. And I began to find some escape in there. And I've learned that escape is kind of an element of dealing with my autism in some respects. And writing allowed me to do that. Reading books. One of the other things is, I'd always had this love for science fiction, but now there were a lot of things happening in the 90s with science fiction. One of them was Babylon 5 had been released. And Babylon 5 probably literally got me through this time because they were putting out new episodes and new seasons at the time. This wasn't the whole thing was complete and now you could go and watch it on whatever. I was at that time watching every new episode it was coming out. It was like a new sci-fi series, and Next Generation for Star Trek was out, and I was just diving into this stuff because I love science fiction, I love fantasy, and out of that kind of kept me going. It got me out of these were positive thoughts, positive things. My work life was terrible because I was a substitute teacher. It was the best thing I could find with my degree at the time. By the way, biblical studies degrees and theological studies degrees, you know what they don't do? Turn into real money in the real world. Make a note. That's why I tell you people that are thinking about the ministry, go get a degree in something useful. Go do that for a couple years, and then if you still have the call after 10 years, then do the ministry when you're 30. Okay, but don't do it now. Don't do it in your 20s. Go find something useful to do. Okay, even if you decide to go into the ministry, that'll help you with the financial side. Trust me. And so I was, engaged in all this stuff, and I started to write stories. I started to write science fiction stories, and I wrote fantasy stories, and it's developed into this love of writing. And the writing and the PC games and PlayStation came out about that time, I think in 1994, and I finally got a copy in 1996 after I graduated from seminary, and I was struggling and depression was hitting me probably 5 out of 7 days a week. I was just depressed. And, at this point, I want to just, if any of my kids, all 3 of my children, you watch this at this point, I apologize for those 2 years. I was a shit father at the time. I wasn't a very good husband. I wasn't a very good son. And it's because most of the time I was just sitting there wallowing in this sadness that I couldn't seem to escape. Now, I apologize with a little asterisk behind it because now I know it's the autistic side of me. My nervous system just couldn't handle the grief. And it was my faith that kept the grief going because I'm going to see this guy again. It's funny how much stress left my life when I was finally able to get closure with my father. Okay, when I was finally able to let that go, all of a sudden there's been a lot changed for the better. I still had my moments where the stress has gotten to me, but never that bad. In fact, this time of my life has been such a fearful thing for me for a long time until very recently. Because I was always, every time I'd get sad, I'd like quick move away from it. I don't want to talk about that. I want to do, because I don't want to fall back into that 2 years of sadness where I literally was basically going to do whatever substitute teaching work I could do. Half the time I didn't have anything. So I was either sitting around, occasionally I'd fill in a church and, things like that. But it was just a bad time of life for me. And so I do apologize to my kids. But at the same time, now I understand why this was there. You really needed a dad there. And you were growing up and you were little and you were going through stuff with Papa too. His death affected the two boys for sure. And, they were little and I should have been there more for you. I really should have. But I was going through my own stuff and I couldn't seem to get out of it. My wife wasn't exactly helpful. I can say that now. She's my ex-wife. I can say that she wasn't all that helpful. You just need to snap out of it. All the things that people shouldn't say to depressed people. Yeah, she was loads of that. And so, it just kind of kept me there. Because if I'd had a proper grief cycle and had some closure to it within like 3 or 6 months, I might have been fine. But I kept clinging to this idea that I was going to see my father again. And then to make matters worse, the pastor of the church, that I was back in my hometown church, I'd finished seminary, and I was trying to get into the ministry, trying to follow the call, being very depressed, being told by, my pastor that I wasn't a very good member. I did sound for the worship team. I'm not a musically inclined person myself, but I have a pretty good ear. And I'm very detail-oriented, thanks to autism probably. And so I'm listening and I'm trying to, and they translated that as I didn't give a care because I wasn't talking back and forth with them. I was listening and trying to make it sound better. And apparently you're not supposed to do that as a sound guy. You're supposed to talk to them and make sure you get it the way they up on the stage want it instead of what sounds good on the floor. And I had a lot of those conversations. And eventually one day the pastor, I wasn't even there. I was staying home watching my kids because I had to watch my kids. And the pastor went after my wife, saying that I didn't care. I obviously didn't care because I wasn't there to run sound for practice. And I'm like, and she's like, he's home watching our kids. We got 3 little kids. And he went off on her and she came home crying. It's the first time ever in my life. I'm a very peaceful guy, but it was one of the probably 4 or 5 times in my life I actually wanted to get up and deck somebody. You don't have the guts to come after me. You go after my wife. And I did tell him so. And then after that, he pulled me from the sound. I preached a message that he didn't like, and so he pulled me off of that. So now I've got this thing of, I've got this call in my life, and now this guy that I'm supposed to be the pastor, he's supposed to be my pastor, is literally pulling me out of every ministry thing. I tried the teen Bible quiz. I was coordinating. I began to coordinate a little bit after this for junior Bible quiz for the Assemblies of God for the way up north section. And all of this, I'm being pulled from ministry, father's death, call of God on my life, pastors being a dick, goes after my wife, and I am just in this really bad place at that moment. I literally almost gave up on the call, the ministry, and the whole 9 yards. I was at that point. And there are some days that I wish I had. Okay, there are some days I wish I had, because at the time, this is 97, 98, and I'm still in my mid late 20s. I could have easily gone back to school at that time. I still had that scientific, mathematical brain at the time. Now, I tried it and I couldn't even. I got past trig and geometry, but I couldn't get into calculus. It just made my brain swim. And probably back then I probably could have handled it, but not now. My brain's lost too much of its elasticity, I think. And I'm just, I'm in this spot where I'm feeling totally lousy. And the only thing I have is, throwing on a computer game, and you know, just writing my feelings, but not sharing them with anybody. Writing out stories, being on theological forums because it was the only place I could use my theology degree. Substitute teaching every once in a while was cool because I get to talk to the kids, and just be normal for a little while. And that was it. I was at a real low spot, and I almost gave up on my call and the whole bit right then. And this is the first time that almost happened. It didn't really happen when my dad died and I was still in the cemetery, because I was like, I got to finish this. I finished my degree. It took me a year and a half to write my thesis. I actually asked for an extension because of my death of my father, and they granted it. And so they let me have another year to write it, and I'm typing it in the word processor, and I was so thankful for that because I'm fairly certain I couldn't have corrected a damn thing. So spelling mistakes, getting rid of that, going over it with a fine-tuned code just took tons and tons of time. And finally I submitted my thesis, graduated in 1996 from seminary, in this depressive state, keep going. 1997 goes by, 1998 goes by, get about, part of the way through 1998. This was my life, this depression cycle, not being there, not being present, just overloaded. My autistic nervous system was just shot. Okay, it was just so overloaded with grief. And all the pressures of trying to get into the ministry and trying to keep my faith, and it just nearly got me. It nearly got me and nearly killed me. If it hadn't been for writing and, oddly enough, Babylon 5 and Star Trek The Next Gen, I wouldn't have made it. Okay, because I kept wanting to watch the new episodes. Kept me going, day by day. And I don't know. I got to that point. I'm like, this isn't worth it. I'm ready to say screw it. And I think the final straw almost was when I applied to get licensed to preach, and the pastor at the time that was being my rival, because I think he was intimidated by me for a lot of reasons. One, I think I was a lot smarter than he was, and sure as hell more educated. And he was very charismatic and whoop-de-doo, Pentecostal charismatic type preacher, and I was more down to earth. And the people responded to down to earth a little bit more, because that whoop-de-doo just didn't resonate with a lot of people, even Pentecostal people, weirdly enough. And he gave me some bad advice. I went into the licensing interview, bombed it, told I wasn't going to be licensed to preach in the Assemblies of God, a denomination I've been a part of all my life. And that was a low blow. I came out crying. My wife comes out crying. And the depression gets worse. And I'm about ready to kick it over. I'm about ready to say screw it. I'm going to go back to school, get a degree in something useful, and go get a real job. And I almost did it, and I almost wish I had. I'll talk more about that, why I stayed next time, because I'm going to stop it right here. I just wanted you to understand that there was a fallout from my father's death that was fairly catastrophic. And looking back at it now, I kind of understand it more. And I wish, you can sit there and talk about prayer and reading the Bible and getting prayed for and all this other crap. Okay, I tell you what ultimately helps me understand this better. Real psychology and a real understanding of autism and a real understanding of depression. Not all the BS of pray for it and it'll go away, you just got to snap out of it and all that crap. Read your Bible and it'll put you in the right frame of mind. I'm like, I don't even know if I believe the Bible anymore. I have a lot of problems with it. None of that worked. None of it worked. Okay, for all the talk about how prayer works and all this other crap works. Uh-uh. Okay, I'll tell you what worked. What's worked for the last few years. Talking it out with somebody who understands it, who can put a name to it, and tell you how to cope with it, and give you real stuff that really works that helps you cope with it. And so, if there's a message out of this particular part, if you're out there struggling with something and you're in the church or you're in the faith somewhere and they're telling you to get prayed for or snap out of it, I got a message for you. Go get therapy. It's worth the money. Okay? It's worth the money if you have to spend it. Okay, find a way. If you're a minister right now or you're feeling the call and you're in the same spot that I was, I got a message for you. Get out. This is your sign that you don't need to be doing this shit. Okay? It's not that everything's going to be roses in the ministry or any profession for that matter, but you need to understand that there is no real help for you inside the church. It's not going to be there. Okay? The expectation of churches as a minister, you're the guy that everybody goes to. You don't go to anybody else, which will be a theme of my ministry, which I'll talk about. But next time I'm going to talk about how a couple of friends got me out of my depression and got me back on the track to ministry, both of which I love very much to this day, although I really wish the one that got me back into the ministry had just shut his hole sometimes. And I'll talk about that next time. But this is the end of this one, and I hope you gain something out of it. Going through this has been kind of helpful for me, and now being able to see things in the proper context, yeah, that's been a real positive for me, so thank you very much. And of course I have to give a big thank you to the Clergy Project and to my therapist, who the Clergy Project led me to, both of them instrumental in helping me get back on my feet again here in my 50s, when I should have been doing all this stuff in my 20s. Thanks a lot. And thank all of you for stopping by. I appreciate every single one of you. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do the things. If you have any stories about your own deconversion that are similar, share them. You never know what part of your story will help somebody else. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. And, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. I think I'm at 985 subscribers as of the making of this video. Watch hours broke 2,800, so we're less than 200 away from memberships and super chat and all that stuff, and about less than 1,200 away, and about a few subscribers from that wonderful ad revenue and partnership with YouTube that I'm looking forward to. Thank you. You guys make that all possible. I appreciate you. And once again, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.